Ladies and gentlemen, there's something sacred about the way a woman loves. It's not loud, it's not boastful, it's not performative. It's intentional, it's transformational, it's divine. And if you've ever been loved by a real woman, one who has walked through her own storms and still chooses to love with both wisdom and fire, you know it's not just affection, it's alignment, it's legacy, it's power. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to unfold will shift the way you see love, loyalty, and feminine strength. These are not just things women do for any man. These are the things they do only for the man they love. And understanding them may just be the difference between keeping a queen or losing her without knowing why. In the stillness of early morning, before the noise of the world begins, there is a quiet strength that lives inside a woman. It is a strength not born from force, but from resilience. A strength that's been tested by heartbreak, by betrayal, by the weight of expectations. Yet, when a woman loves a man deeply and truly, that very strength, so essential to her survival, softens. And that softening is not weakness, it is wisdom, it is choice, it is sacred. You see, a woman who has had to build herself, who has held herself through storms, who has stitched together her own wounds in silence, is a fortress. She doesn't allow herself to be penetrated easily by emotion. Not because she's incapable of feeling, but because feeling, for her, has often meant pain. So when she begins to soften that strength in your presence, you must understand it is the ultimate act of trust. She is not letting go of her power, she is allowing you to exist within it. She doesn't need you to complete her. She is not fractured or broken awaiting a savior. What she offers you is space. Space within her confidence, space within her resolve, and that space is sacred. Think of the bamboo tree. It is firm, resilient, and strong. But under pressure, it bends. It moves with the wind so it does not break. In love, a woman becomes like the bamboo. Her strength does not disappear. It adapts. It flows around the man she loves, creating an environment where he can grow without fear of being overpowered. Her gentleness becomes a kind of discipline. Her calm, a kind of leadership. This softening is not immediate. It is gradual, cautious, deliberate. She might still challenge you. She might test the walls around your soul, checking if you're safe enough for her to put down her sword. She listens carefully to how you speak to others. She watches how you treat the world when no one's watching. She notices if your strength protects or dominates. And if she senses you are rooted in integrity, that your strength is steady but not harsh, then the softening begins. At first, it's subtle. She laughs more freely. She asks deeper questions. She touches your shoulder lightly in passing. Her eyes linger a moment longer when you're not looking. These are not random behaviors. They are the early signs of trust growing roots. Consider the story of Amina, a woman who had spent years climbing the ranks in a corporate world dominated by competition and cold logic. She had to be sharp, assertive, and unshakable just to survive, let alone succeed. But when she met David, something unfamiliar began to stir. David didn't compete with her power. He didn't diminish it or try to control it. Instead, he honored it. He saw her armor and didn't flinch. He didn't rush to take it off her. He simply made it unnecessary. In his presence, she didn't have to be on all the time. She didn't have to prove her worth. She could exhale. And over time, the same woman who had once built walls around her emotions began to invite him in. Not because he demanded it, but because he respected the gate. Her strength, once used to protect her from the world, now made room for him within it. This is the mystery of feminine love. It is both fire and water, steel and silk. The softening of strength is not an abandonment of self. It is an invitation for mutual safety. A woman will only soften when she knows that her vulnerability will not be weaponized, when she trusts that the man beside her will not use her openness to gain control. That is when true connection begins. So when a woman begins to soften in your presence, do not take it lightly. Do not confuse it with fragility. Realize that what you are witnessing is not a lack of power, but the highest form of it. Power that does not need to dominate to be respected. And this leads us deeper, into something more profound. Because once a woman has softened enough to feel safe, she begins to build. Not build in the way the world understands. Tall towers or loud applause, but build in silence. Build in the dark. She becomes an architect of your inner world. She sees who you could be, even when the evidence is still invisible. And she begins to invest, not just her time or her energy, but her belief. This kind of belief is rare. It is not flattery. It is not delusion. It is discernment. A woman in love has a strange way of seeing not just what is, but what could be. She reads between your words. She senses the quiet ache in your soul. She knows what you're capable of, even when you've forgotten it yourself. Building in the dark means supporting a man when no one else sees his potential. It means showing up when the spotlight is off, when the applause is absent, when failure seems more likely than success. It means encouraging his vision when all he has are sketches and ideas. And let us be clear, this is not blind loyalty. This is inspired wisdom. She has assessed the foundation. She has measured the walls. And though they may be incomplete, she sees the possibility of a palace. Think of a woman who loves an artist who hasn't sold a single painting yet. Or a woman who encourages her partner to quit a stable job to pursue a business he believes in. Or a woman who wakes up at 5 a.m. to pack lunch for a man studying for exams that might not yield immediate results. These are not small gestures. These are architectural decisions. She is laying bricks while others scoff at the blueprint. There's a story about Maria and Julian, childhood friends who eventually became partners. Julian had always been drawn to engineering, but lacked the resources to pursue higher education. When they got together, Maria worked double shifts to support them, while Julian studied online, often late into the night. She believed in his brilliance, not because he had degrees, but because she had seen the way his eyes lit up when he solved problems. She knew his love for learning was real. Years later, Julian became one of the leading minds in green architecture. When asked about his success, he always pointed back to the silent years, when Maria built in the dark. This is the woman's hidden genius. While others measure worth by what is seen, she builds by what she feels. She understands that the most powerful things in life, faith, love, vision, are invisible before they become reality. And she is patient enough to nurture the unseen. But make no mistake, this type of woman is not passive. She is not waiting around hoping a man changes. No, she is active in her belief. She challenges, she questions, she uplifts, she stretches him. She holds him accountable to the man she knows he can become. And she does all this with grace. Not through lectures, but through her presence. Not through demand, but through example. She becomes a mirror, not just reflecting who he is, but who he is meant to be. To the man on the receiving end of this love, know this: her belief is not unconditional. It is sacred. And sacred things must be treated with reverence. If she builds while you remain idle, she will eventually tire. If she invests while you squander, she will eventually withdraw. Because even a woman who builds in the dark must see signs of light. The energy exchange must be mutual, even if not equal. You may not be able to give her everything she gives you, but you must give her something: your growth, your gratitude, your presence, your progress. When a woman loves, her investment is not in your status. It's in your soul. She doesn't just want you to win in the world. She wants you to win within. And that is what makes her love revolutionary. So imagine this: a woman has softened her strength, not out of weakness, but as an act of trust. She has begun to build in the dark, not for validation, but because she believes in your unseen future. The question now is, what will you do with it? Because how you respond to this love will determine whether it flourishes or fades, whether it becomes your sanctuary or your biggest regret. And this is where we begin to transition into what love asks of both people, especially when the journey becomes less about dreams and more about decisions, about challenges, about conflict and character. Because once the softening and building have begun, the real test begins, not in what is easy, but in what must be chosen when it is hard. There is a moment in every deep relationship, especially those held between a man and a woman, where love ceases to be a feeling and must become a deliberate choice. That moment often arises not when things are going well, not when affection is easy, but when tension enters the space, when conflict tests the boundaries of patience and understanding. And it is precisely in these moments that we observe a fundamental truth about mature feminine love. When a woman truly loves a man, she begins to prioritize peace over the intoxicating need to be right. This is no small feat. It is, in fact, an act of disciplined wisdom, and it challenges one of the most primal urges of the ego, to win. You see, many relationships fall apart not due to betrayal or loss, but because of the constant battle to be correct. Arguments that begin over petty differences spiral into devastating divisions, because both parties insist on asserting their righteousness. But love, true love, requires sacrifice, and one of the greatest sacrifices a woman in love makes is the choice to subdue her pride in favor of peace. This is not submission in the archaic or regressive sense. It is not the silencing of her voice or the denial of her value. Rather, it is a deeper strength, the ability to assess the cost of being right in the moment against the value of preserving long-term connection. She understands that proving a point might satisfy the ego, but it rarely heals the relationship. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." The woman who loves you, if she is wise, will not seek to overpower you in disagreement. She will seek to understand you. That does not mean she agrees with everything. It means she recognizes that harmony cannot exist where domination prevails. In a deeply bonded relationship, the aim is not to conquer, but to coexist. The aim is not victory, but growth. Consider the story of Lydia and Marcus. Lydia was fiercely intelligent and known among her friends for her sharp debate skills. In her career, this served her well. She was a lawyer, practiced in the art of logic and argumentation. But when she came home, her relationship with Marcus required a different form of communication. At first, she struggled. Her instinct was to dissect every disagreement until Marcus surrendered. Over time, though, she noticed something each time she won. Something subtle in Marcus withered. He withdrew. Not because he lacked strength, but because he felt unseen. One evening, during a particularly heated argument about finances, Lydia stopped mid-sentence. Not because she ran out of counterpoints, but because she recognized the look in his eyes. Hurt, not defiance. She paused, took a breath, and said, "I don't want to win this. I want to understand you." That moment changed everything. It wasn't about money. It was about feeling heard, respected, and safe. This choice, to favor peace over the impulse to prove, is not just an emotional gesture. It's a philosophical stance. It affirms that the relationship itself is greater than any single disagreement, that the person matters more than the point. And that is a hallmark of love that transcends infatuation and enters the realm of spiritual partnership. It takes a psychologically integrated woman to reach this level, one who has wrestled with her own ego, who has discovered that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of maturity. She doesn't walk away from hard conversations. She doesn't silence herself to maintain artificial calm. She simply chooses the right time, tone, and intent. Because for her, the goal isn't to be heard the loudest. It's to be heard the clearest. This also speaks to her ability to regulate her emotional state. Emotional regulation is not often celebrated in popular culture, but it is one of the most essential skills in intimate relationships. The woman who can pause, reflect, and articulate her feelings rather than react impulsively is a woman who has power, not over others, but over herself. That's the kind of woman a man can build a future with. Because she won't ignite fires she has no intention of extinguishing. She won't weaponize vulnerability, and she won't confuse volume with value. What does this look like in practical terms? It's the woman who, during an argument, listens actively rather than preparing her rebuttal. It's the woman who says, "Let's take a moment," when the conversation gets too heated, instead of escalating it. It's the woman who sends a thoughtful message after a disagreement, clarifying her intentions, affirming her love, and reopening the door to connection. And let us be clear, choosing peace is not about avoiding truth. It's about delivering truth in a way that builds rather than breaks. She can challenge her partner, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, but she does it with respect, with an understanding that her words carry weight, with the wisdom to know when silence speaks louder than correction. But this level of connection, this level of trust, only emerges when another sacred dimension is present in the relationship: vulnerability. Vulnerability is the currency of intimacy, and when a woman loves deeply, she begins to expose her sacred. That is, she begins to reveal the parts of herself that are raw, unpolished, and deeply personal. Her fears, her dreams, her regrets, her spiritual questions, her emotional landscape. And this is not an easy thing for a woman who has had to be strong most of her life. Many women have been taught to be self-contained, to never need too much, feel too deeply, or trust too easily. Society tells them to be independent to the point of isolation, to rely on no one, to be both the fire and the shield. But love, true love, asks for more. It asks for surrender. Not surrender of self, but surrender of the mask. When a woman begins to open this way, she is not asking for pity. She is asking for presence. She wants to know, can you hold space for my humanity? Can you stay steady when I am uncertain? Can you witness my truth without trying to fix or judge it? This exposure of the sacred is a holy act. It's the woman saying, here I am, not just the version of me that smiles in public, but the me who doubts in private, the me who has scars you may not understand, the me who wants to trust you but also fears being hurt. The sacred may come in stories about her past, about moments that changed her, about losses that left her different. It may come through silence, long pauses where she's searching for words. It may come through tears, those rare sacred tears that carry more than sadness. They carry memory, longing, even hope. And if you, as the man in her life, cannot recognize these moments for what they are, you will miss something irreplaceable. Because a woman can give her body to someone she does not love, but she will only give her soul to someone she trusts. And that trust is not given easily. It is earned through consistency, attentiveness, and the quiet assurance that you are a safe place. When she reveals her sacred, she is watching you closely, not to see if you'll be impressed, but to see if you'll stay. She's watching your eyes, your posture, your breath. She's measuring your presence. She wants to know, is this a man who can witness me and not shrink away? There's an old Jewish proverb that says, to love someone is to learn the song in their heart and sing it back to them when they have forgotten it. When a woman shares her sacred, she's inviting you to learn that song. And the men who know how to listen, truly listen, will never again confuse her vulnerability for weakness. Take the example of Sophie and Daniel. Sophie had a history of trauma that she rarely spoke about. She had done the work, therapy, journaling, spiritual reflection, but some days the past would still find her. Daniel never tried to fix her. He never offered platitudes. What he did was far more powerful. He sat with her, held her hand, said, I'm here. Take your time. He bore witness without judgment, and in doing so, he became not just her partner, but her sanctuary. This kind of presence changes a woman. It reorients her understanding of safety. It teaches her that she doesn't have to be on all the time, that she can be both radiant and raw, that she can be whole even when she feels broken. And that is what allows love to deepen into something enduring, something that doesn't fade with time, but evolves. So to the men who wonder what it means when a woman starts to fight less and feel more, when she shares more than she demands, when she pauses instead of pushes, understand that she is not losing interest. She is expanding her trust. She is inviting you into the inner chamber. Not everyone gets that invitation. It is not something to be taken lightly. And to the women who wonder whether it's safe to let someone in, remember, vulnerability without discernment is dangerous, but vulnerability with discernment is divine. You do not owe your sacred to every man, but when you find one who listens with his whole being, who stays when others run, who honors your silence and your speech, you will know, because your soul will feel less guarded, your body less tense, your heart less burdened. These are not small signs. They are the foundations of a union that can endure not just pleasure and ease, but struggle and transformation. Because love is not just about joy. It is about depth. And depth only comes when two people are willing to meet not just in light, but in shadow. Not just in celebration, but in confession. So when a woman chooses peace over pride, when she reveals her sacred rather than performing perfection, she is loving with her whole being. And in doing so, she is inviting the man she loves to do the same. There's a paradox at the heart of deep romantic love. The more you give away, the stronger you become. And yet, this truth is often veiled beneath the modern obsession with independence, autonomy, and self-sufficiency. We are told, especially women, that to need someone is to be weak, to rely on a man is regressive, and to serve in any way is to betray one's own power. But nothing could be further from the truth when we examine love through a mature, integrated, and psychologically sound lens. One of the most profound things a woman does only for the man she truly loves is invest in his potential. Even when the world has not yet caught up with her vision of him, this act is not merely emotional support, it is psychological alignment. It is the deliberate and conscious decision to see a man not only for who he is, but for who he can become. And more importantly, to stand beside him while he becomes it. That's not fantasy, it's faith in motion. It's not codependence, it's courage. And it is perhaps one of the most powerful, demanding, and often unrecognized contributions a woman can make in a man's life. Let us begin by establishing a foundational principle. Potential is not a guarantee, it's a responsibility. A man's potential is not some dreamy abstraction that automatically unfolds with time. It must be cultivated, fought for, painfully extracted from the chaos of his inner and outer world. And the woman who sees it, before it is manifested, before it is profitable, before it is visible to others, must contend with the frustration of believing in what is not yet seen. That requires spiritual clarity. That requires emotional resilience. That requires a high tolerance for ambiguity. In other words, it is not a role for the faint-hearted. In psychological terms, this is an expression of the archetype of the muse, but not in the poetic, fragile sense. Rather, it is the role of the spiritual catalyst. She is the one who sees order in his chaos, who brings structure to his storm. She doesn't take over his mission. She inspires it. She doesn't build it for him. She stands with him while he builds it himself. And that distinction is critical, because the woman who loves truly and deeply is not trying to raise a son. She's supporting a partner. And support, when done well, is the most powerful form of leadership. There is a moment in the life of nearly every great man where someone, often a woman, saw something in him that he hadn't yet seen in himself. And that belief, that reflection, was enough to push him into transformation. Think of Viktor Frankl, whose entire will to survive in the Nazi concentration camps was fueled by the mental image of reuniting with his wife and sharing his ideas with the world. Think of C.S. Lewis, who credited much of his intellectual and emotional maturation to Joy Davidman, the woman who became not only his wife but also his intellectual equal and inspiration. The woman who invests in a man's potential does not do so blindly. She studies him. She listens carefully. She observes how he handles adversity, how he treats others when no one is watching, how he recovers from failure. She's not enamored by charisma. She's anchored in character. Her love is not for the man he pretends to be or wishes he was. Her love is for the man who dares to grow, because potential without growth is delusion. And she has no interest in illusion. Her love is costly. It requires honesty, both from herself and from him. One of the best examples of this form of feminine strength is the story of Eleanor and Thomas. Thomas was a brilliant mechanical engineer, but when Eleanor met him, he was unemployed, directionless, and wrestling with deep self-doubt after a failed startup. Most people in his life had written him off, suggesting he settle for a stable but uninspiring job. Eleanor, however, saw beyond the current mess. She saw how his eyes lit up when he talked about innovation, how he lost track of time sketching designs, how he quietly mentored younger engineers, even while grappling with his own setbacks. Instead of pushing him to take the easy route, she challenged him to refine his vision, to reach out to mentors, to build his skills even when no one was watching. When he hesitated out of fear, she didn't shame him. She stood firm beside him and said, "I believe in what you're building. Even if no one else does right now, I do." Her support wasn't just verbal, it was strategic. She helped him create structure in his daily life. She made space for him to focus. She celebrated the small wins. And more importantly, she never let him forget that his work mattered. 3 years later, Thomas launched a company that would go on to secure significant investment and transform the manufacturing sector in his region. And when asked in an interview about the turning point in his journey, he didn't name a business partner or investor. He said, "It was Eleanor. She didn't just love who I was. She loved who I could become. And she held that vision for me when I had lost it myself." This kind of investment is rare in today's world because it requires delay of gratification. We are conditioned to expect immediate results, instant transformations, and effortless relationships. But growth, real lasting growth, is non-linear. It's messy. It's slow. And the woman who commits to walking alongside a man in that journey must possess an inner stability that doesn't waver with external chaos. Jordan Peterson often speaks about the importance of bearing responsibility and voluntarily confronting the unknown. A woman who loves in this way is doing precisely that. She is voluntarily entering the unknown of a man's becoming, bearing the responsibility of reflecting his highest self back to him. That is a sacred act, and it is not without risk. Sometimes the man she believes in will not rise. Sometimes he will retreat, self-sabotage, or betray the trust she's invested. But even then, her act of faith is not wasted, because it reveals her capacity for depth. It proves that her love is not transactional, it is transformational. This kind of love is deeply connected to the Jungian idea of individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. The woman who invests in a man's potential is often the very catalyst for his individuation. She challenges him not to stay small. She questions his excuses. She doesn't coddle his wounds, but she doesn't ignore them either. She says, "I see the warrior in you, but you must fight for him." And that call to rise is often what separates the boy from the man, the passive from the purposeful, the average from the extraordinary. But let's not romanticize this entirely. This process is not all encouragement and celebration. Sometimes it's confrontation. Sometimes it's a hard truth. The woman who believes in a man's potential must also have the courage to say, "You are playing beneath your capacity." She must have the inner strength to provoke discomfort, not to punish, but to provoke change. That's not nagging, that's leadership. And if he's a real man, he will recognize it as such. In one relationship I studied, the woman, Samantha, had a partner, Julian, who was comfortable coasting. He had talent but no discipline, passion but no execution. She loved him deeply, but she refused to enable his stagnation. When he would make excuses for not pursuing his ambitions, she would ask him plainly, "Is this how you want to be remembered?" When he would blame others for his failures, she would challenge him to take ownership. And when he finally started to take himself seriously, waking up early, cutting distractions, refining his craft, she was his biggest supporter. Not because he became someone new, but because he finally became who she knew he could be. This dual role of supporter and challenger is what makes her love so potent. She doesn't just comfort, she calls forth. She doesn't just accept, she amplifies. And that balance is what enables her man to move from potential to purpose. There's a psychological cost to this, of course. To love someone for who they're becoming is to live with uncertainty. It's to attach your heart to something not yet real. But then again, isn't that the essence of faith? As Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The woman who loves a man's potential is exercising one of the highest forms of faith, not in a deity, but in a destiny, and in a world where so many people are trying to make each other into commodities, loved only when they perform. This kind of love is revolutionary. And so, to the women who have chosen to believe in their man, not because he's already there, but because he's on the way, your strength is immense. You are not weak for hoping. You are not foolish for seeing more than others do. You are an architect of destiny. And if he is wise, he will not take your vision lightly. Because when a woman believes in a man's future, she becomes a force nothing can replicate. Not success, not status, not applause. Because she knew him before the world did. And that knowing is what builds empires. Underneath every enduring relationship lies an invisible architecture of commitment, a deep, unwavering loyalty that holds everything together when the winds of chaos threaten to unravel it all. It is not the fleeting glow of infatuation, nor the comfort of companionship, that ultimately sustains love over time. What preserves it is the decision, often quiet and unseen, to remain loyal even when it would be easier to leave. One of the most profound acts a woman performs only for the man she truly loves is the radical choice of exclusive loyalty. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, this loyalty is not transactional. It is not a bargain struck between two parties seeking mutual benefit. It is not loyalty because of perfection, or because of consistent happiness, or even because of certainty. It is loyalty rooted in voluntary sacrifice, chosen with the full awareness that love is never without pain. The woman who remains faithful to her man does so not because she is naive or dependent, but because she understands the weight of commitment and the moral power of standing by something and someone worth believing in. Let's be clear, loyalty is not submission to abuse or a tolerance for mediocrity. Loyalty does not mean silence in the face of disrespect. It does not mean staying where one is diminished or erased. Quite the opposite. Real loyalty at its core is a confrontation with chaos and an inner vow to stand within it, not to be overtaken by it. It's the belief that enduring love is forged not in ease but in trial, and that the storms do not have to break the bond if both people are anchored in truth. There is a deep psychological resonance here. In Jungian thought, commitment is not merely a social construct, it is a crucible of